Welcome to the Gospel Addict Podcast. I'm Greg Bryan.
And I'm Jim Reski.
We're gospel addicts because we believe the gospel of Jesus isn't just good news, it's the best news ever.
We're addicted to the gospel because it doesn't just start us out in the Christian life, it is the Christian life.
Join us as we look at the Bible through the lens of the gospel.
Thanks so much for listening.
Welcome back to the Gospel Addict Podcast. Jim, what are we doing tonight?
Well, Greg, first of all, thanks. Good to be with you. And I'm so glad to be doing the podcast together tonight. We're going to kind of go back to the format we've been doing, which is prepping for the teaching that we do at a Bible study that we participate in. So for anyone joining the podcast for the first time, this is kind of like the way this all started. Greg and I would call each other up and talk about these things, talk about a passage of scripture, and we'd be on the phone for an hour and saying, gee, that was just a great discussion. We both really got a lot out of it and wondered if other people would get something out of it too. And it was kind of one of the part of the genesis of this whole podcast. And so now, as we both teach regularly for a Bible study for the church we're involved with, we do this to prepare to teach. And so, Greg, you're teaching here in a couple of weeks on the book of Joshua. And so sometimes if it's the way our study is structured, if it's a small passage, like you're only teaching on 4 chapters in the book of John, we might read those passages and then talk about it together, just and work it out. Now you're teaching the entire book of Joshua, so we probably won't read the whole book of Joshua tonight to everybody, but we'll talk about major themes. But then and a lot of it's just, so our listeners know, is us doing it cold. It's not rehearsed. It's not prepared. It's not like we have the talk ready. By the time a couple Saturdays rolls around, Greg, I'm sure you will have it all done and polished and ready to go. And we record those teachings that we give, and you'll post those as a podcast. So that'll, for our listeners, will be a little more polished treatment of Joshua if they want to tune back. But this is the raw material coming together in real time as we struggle with things and pick each other's brains and flip through pages and try to figure out what the Lord's telling us from the book of Joshua.
That's a great explanation, Jim, and that's exactly what we do. So right now, I told you earlier, I feel like I'm about 25% prepared for teaching the book of Joshua. I mean, teaching a whole book of the Bible is kind of an overwhelming, but also exciting endeavor. So let's just start off with just a broad outline. Obviously, the book of Joshua is kind of a bridge from Moses to the Israelites getting into the promised land. So the first 5 chapters of the book is kind of Moses passes the torch on to Joshua, and Joshua is preparing the people to conquer the land that God has promised. Yeah.
So the first 5 books of the Bible are called what now?
Oh, the first 5 books of the Bible are the Pentateuch, or the Torah,
right?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. And then this is kind of the bridge between those books and Judges, where everything kind of goes crazy.
which I'm doing next after. Yeah, I thought you get the upside. You get Joshua.
Yeah,
I clean up a little bit with Judges. Just
the book of Judges has that cycle. Everyone does what they see right in their own eyes, and
that's right.
And they turn to God, and then things go well, and then they fall into idolatry, and then yeah. But the book of Joshua is, God promised the Israelites that he would take them into the promised land. We call it the promised land. So the first 5 chapters is the preparation for that, and Joshua is their leader. So Moses passes the torch to Joshua, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Because he's one of the original spies who went into the land. He and Caleb, there was 12 spies that were sent in, but only 2 gave a good report, basically saying, let's take the land. We can do this. They had faith that God could do it. So then chapters 6 through 12, we see them actually taking the land. Lots of different battles, Jericho, different cities. And then chapters 13 to 22 is where they divide the land up between the different tribes, the 12 tribes of Israel. And then there's kind of a closing remarks, chapters 23 and 24. It's hard to tell exact date this was written, but sometime in the 1406 BC is what seems to be the most reasonable time frame when it was written. But we like to look at big themes. So Jim, I'll ask you first because I've identified a couple themes, but I'll ask you, have any themes stand out to you as you think of this book?
Well, one thing I want to mention, because you just went over that kind of outline, I was looking at some notes too, the outline of the book, and I thought this was kind of cool. I've often said that you don't need to know the original language of scriptures to really be a Christian, to follow the Lord. You can read it in your own language, whatever language that is. There's so many resources out there for most of the major languages, although I think as some of our listeners in their country, that may not be true, because we were just looking at a worldwide map of where some of our listeners are, and there's a lot of listeners scattered around the globe, so I shouldn't say that so in such a cavalier manner. There may be people listening where they don't have a lot of resources in their own language. Nevertheless, in the English language, there's a lot of public resources. You don't need to know Hebrew, but it probably is a whole lot more fun to read it in Hebrew, because the 4 sections you just talked about, the way this book is divided into 4 sections: crossing into the land, taking the land, dividing the land, and serving the Lord in the land. Those 4 sections. In Hebrew, the sound of the words is nifty, and supposedly was done intentionally. I'm no Hebrew scholar, so if Hebrew scholars listening, they'll think I'm butchering this, but phonetically it reads like this: Abar, Lakak, Kalak, Abad. So it's Abar and Abad. The first one, the last one kind of sound similar, and the 2 middle ones, Lakak and Kalak, kind of sound similar. And maybe that was set up that way so people would remember those 4 sections of the book. Just a little literary tidbit I thought was
That
cool
is interesting. See, I'm learning from you already, Jim.
I learn from each other.
I did not have that. You know what? Maybe it's appropriate just to start with some of the popular verses from the book of Joshua. You want to read Joshua chapter 1, verses 8 and 9?
Exactly. I put a big box around my Bible. I was highlighting it. This is a scripture memory verse for both of us, I think, when we were younger, but it's so great. So this is Joshua 1, verses 8 and 9. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Just great verses.
Yeah. Oh, those are great verses. And if anyone's listening and you haven't memorized those verses, make a note right now to meditate and try to memorize those verses. Another good one is at the end of the book, Joshua 24:15.
Yep.
But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods of your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. That's a great verse.
Yeah, it is interesting. We got to put, it makes it really stark. Like, just you got to make a choice. Who are you going to serve? Who are you going to follow? And it's like just as true today as it was then. God gives us that agency. God gives us the ability to choose. And he says, you follow me or not. You don't have to follow me if you don't want to.
And then there's little verses like Joshua chapter 1, verse 5. No one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's a great promise.
Yeah, I always want to be careful of those promises, Greg. I don't know how do you feel about that, because there's some promises that I think that are written specifically for the person. Like maybe he was definitely promising that to Joshua.
Yes.
And then
do they apply to Christians?
Can I say, hey, God promised me that too? And can I read myself into that promise that way? And I don't know if there's a biblical principle to say sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, right?
I think there is a biblical principle, because there's a verse in the New Testament that says, all the promises that were given to Abraham are yes in Christ.
Mm.
And so, um, there's we definitely have to be careful. And exercise some caution here. But like in that verse, when it says, as I was with Moses, so I will be with you, the promise that God will be with us, I think is a promise you can find all over the scriptures.
Oh
And
yeah.
also that I will never leave you nor forsake you,
Right.
I think is Jesus says similar things. And so I think that um, many of yes, people can take these, and the whole name it and claim it is not a great way to live your Christian life.
Hmm.
But I do think that the Bible's full of thousands of promises and that we are meant to meditate on them, and they're supposed to encourage us because, I mean, just think about it right now. Like, America is so divided and people
Yeah.
are so stressed, anxious. I mean, young people are suicidal in certain cases. Um, I mean, there's just it's a strange environment, but we need to have the assurance that God is with us. You
Oh yeah.
know,
This promise in particular, and he says, "I will never leave you, forsake you." You're right. Jesus does say the same thing. So I think that's I'm pretty sound ground with that one. By the way, you use the words name it and claim it. Do you want to just explain that a little bit for maybe listeners that might not know what the name is? It the movement or uh, idea?
well, I don't think it's popular as much. You don't hear about it much anymore. It's kind of tied into the prosperity gospel where
Oh,
people just pull verses and I mean, you could even do it with Joshua 1:8, where it says, if you meditate on God's law day and night and you're careful to do everything written, then you will be prosperous and
oh
successful.
yeah, right.
So a name it and claim it person would be like, God wants me to be rich.
Yeah, right.
Um, and it's all about material success, but I think there's other ways we can be prosperous. We could be rich in relationships with fellow believers. We could be just spiritually rich in our connection with God. So, um, you know, it's just I just want to caution people to, and we have to take things in context, which is what you're saying. Some of the
That's right.
promises are meant for the specific person. Um, you know,
Well, especially in this book where you have territorial promises that are being filled out to like for conquest, that it's not something that Christians today say, well, God told me to go conquer this city because it was written in the book of Joshua. And by the way, so in this verse in particular about then you'll make your way prosperous and then you'll have good success. You're right. People could look at that and say, see, God wants me to have material wealth in my life right now. But he was saying that to these people. Even when he was saying this to Joshua, he wasn't saying, I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to bless you and fight your battles for you. I'm going to fulfill my will and by you entering this land. But when we'll get to the story in a minute where the guy takes some of the silver and gold and puts them under his tent and says, like, hey, he may even say, God, so he name and claim it. God told me to be prosperous. I'm going to take some of this silver. And that didn't work out well for him or his family. So,
definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah, let's dive into some of these stories. So, do you have any big themes that you want to mention?
the biggest thing I think, a couple things. One is just the notion of seeing Jesus showing up. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier, just to say, how do you think Jesus shows up in the book? Because I want to make sure that when we read these books in the Old Testament, you don't just say, "Oh, that's a nice history lesson." That you say, how do you understand the gospel through the book of Joshua? How does it point us to Christ and point us to the gospel? And I think there are a couple big themes that point you that way, like this thing about I really want you. This book of the law, the verse we just read, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. God's talking about his own personal righteousness and holiness, and I think there's some real consequence for sin in this book. And so I think that you see that God is very concerned about morality and our moral behavior, the moral behavior of his chosen people, the moral behavior of the people that were living in the promised land at the time that was very abhorrent to God. And so there's a lot to say about to point out our sinful nature and our need for a savior. And in the contrast of our sinful nature with God's holiness, it's not a small gulf. It's a huge gulf, it's an insurmountable gulf, right? That is God says, here's my holy standard, and it is unbelievably high. And here's your behavior, and it's unbelievably low. And you need someone to fill that gap for you. So that's kind of a background of the gospel. But I was wondering if you saw maybe you saw Jesus.
Well, Joshua is a type of Jesus. Remember that the Greek name Jesus simply translates the Hebrew name Joshua.
Oh, it's the same?
It's the same. Their names are identical. Whatever Israel received in the promised land, they received through the hand of Joshua. Whatever we receive from God, we receive through Jesus Christ, our Joshua.
Oh, that's great.
So that's one way.
Yeah.
But then there is that really fascinating story in chapter 5, I think.
Okay. With the commander of the Lord's army.
Commander of the Lord army.
What'd you make of that?
I love this. Let's read it and talk about it. Let's read it and talk about it.
You want to read it?
So it says, when Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, "Are you for us or for our adversaries?" And he said, "No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, "What does my Lord say to his servant?" And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, "Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so.
And for our readers, by the way, that was Joshua chapter 5, verses 13 through 15, just in case you're following along at home.
Yeah, and this happens right before the whole story of Jericho, which I'm sure most of our audience is familiar with.
Right.
I think it's fascinating. I love the answer that the commander of the Lord's army. Some people say the commander of the Lord's army might have been Jesus himself.
Yeah, what do you think of that? That's my first thought is because he worships him, right? And
he does worship him, and I think that
well, it says he worshipped. I don't know if he says he worshipped him. My version just says Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped.
Right. And that's where I think that he was definitely sent from God, right? I mean, Joshua definitely knew this was either a representative from God or God himself. I like the idea that it was Jesus. But I love just this conversation. I love Joshua because he's like, "Hey, are you for us or for our adversaries?" In other words, are you on my side, or are you with us, or are you with the good guys or the bad guys? And I love the fact that this guy says, no, I'm not. And what he's saying to Joshua is, you're asking the wrong question. It shouldn't be, your side or their side. It's are you on God's side?
That's right.
Or not?
Right. That's right.
And so that's why he answers, no, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. And then,
so earlier in the podcast, you're talking about the division in society today, right? I mean, how there's such a rift in society. We feel it in our own country because we're here in the States. Maybe other people feel in their countries as well, but we feel this rift, and people want to say, "Well, God's on my side." Oh no, God's on my side. If God would show up and say, "Well, yeah, settle this right now, God. Whose side are you on?" And I think this is timeless because God says the question is, "Are you on my side?" Right? And you need to make sure you are aligned with me and not trying to drag me on your side. That's a huge timeless lesson for us all, I think.
So just think about Joshua's mental, put yourself in his shoes at this point. He's getting ready to conquer Jericho, and he comes across this guy, And so he's basically like, okay, whose side are you on our side or on their side? And he's like, no. And then all of a sudden everything changes. He goes from like this framework of a physical battle that he's about ready to fight to an encounter with a spiritual being or God himself. And so, and Joshua does the right thing. He falls on his face and he worships, which shows great humility. It shows, great spiritual insight. And then his next question is, what does my Lord say to his servant?
So he does align his heart.
He aligns his heart and he says, you are my Lord.
Right.
I am your servant.
Right.
And then the next thing that the commander of the Lord's army says is, take off your sandals from your feet, for the place you're standing is holy. And it says, and Joshua did so. And then the story kind of ends. And then
it ends.
I know. What happened next?
What'd you talk about?
Yeah. How long was he there? How long did he stay there?
Yeah, it definitely leaves you wanting more. And maybe it's not the point. This is not where this is a moment of great revelation, or where a great, God's carving new words in stone like he did on Mount Sinai, the Ten Commandments. This is just an encounter, but I think you nailed it when he says that, what does the Lord, instantly, are you on my side or their side? And gets the answer no. And then he quickly lines up his heart with God's heart, right? What does my Lord say to his servant? And it's like we always talk about, Greg, the two great sins of humankind.
Yeah.
Number one, I'm not a bad person. And number two, no one tells me what to do. And he has completely overcome the second one. He's like, you can tell me, I'm here to serve you. You can tell me what to do. So just fantastic. But it does definitely leave you as a reader wanting more, because it ends so quickly.
So then you gotta ask this question: why did Jesus come to Israel at this strategic time?
Well, the battle plan for Jericho is kind of a cockamamie battle plan from an earthly, worldly, fleshly perspective, right? You're going to walk around this walled city and blow trumpets and make noise, and the walls are going to fall down. You'll take the city. It's not like you're going to bombard it. You're not going to build siege works. You're not going to have cannons. You don't have weapons. You're just going to make a lot of noise, and don't worry, it's all going to work out just fine. So to have confidence going into that battle, it would have helped to have met personally the commander of the armies of the Lord to know that.
Yes. Right? Yeah. So I think you're right. I think there's two reasons. First, he had to instruct Joshua in the plan to capture Jericho.
Okay.
Joshua will carry out a plan in the following chapter that is so improbable it could only have been initiated at the direct command of God himself.
Right.
So, but the second of all, think about this. Most of all, he had to conquer Israel. Before Israel could conquer anything else in the promised land, they had to be conquered by God.
How so?
And Joshua's total submission shows that they are conquered by him. They needed to be on God's side. Maybe Joshua was kind of thinking too much in the physical realm of like, or maybe being tempted to be like, I mean, just the fact that he just the whole interaction of between these two people. I mean, when he says, are you on my side or are you on my enemy's side? And he's like, neither. I mean, God was making it very clear that Joshua needed to be conquered.
Yeah.
First.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that and in a way, like spiritually prepared for what they were about to do.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's funny because we've been there, the last direct encounters Moses had, obviously Moses had direct encounters with the Lord, Mount Sinai, 10 Commandments, and the tent of meeting when his face was glowing, all those things. But that was a generation ago, right? This whole generation had grown up in the wilderness without, and the whole point was going to say your generation is all going to die off before your next generation enters.
They weren't necessarily spiritually prepared. They weren't even circumcised.
Well, I was going to mention that because in the previous, right, they weren't like following that ritual, and they weren't circumcised, and so maybe it's just like, okay, we got you spiritually ready for this. So I like the way you put it. They had to be conquered, and they had to give their hearts to the Lord.
Let's go back to the idea of themes. I think one of
Yeah.
the themes in Joshua is leadership matters,
Yeah.
because God used a human, Joshua, to lead the Israelites. As long as Joshua led well, the people were victorious. But there was a time where we see that Joshua failed. You remember what that was?
No. What was
And
that?
when he failed, the people suffered. The deception at Gibeon.
Oh, yeah. Was that him personally, or was it the elders you promised them?
I think that,
Why don't you describe the story for our readers quickly in case and where it is so they can follow along.
well, I have to find it myself.
Chapter 9, Joshua 9, the Gibeonite deception.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
people from Gibeon come out. Everyone's terrified of them because the Israelites are, so strong and powerful. So they come out and
They
act
come
like
up with a plan to
right,
deceive the Israelites by making them think they're from a far off land and saying, let's live in peace together. Let's sign a peace treaty. And the the failure of Joshua appears to be verse 15.
oh yeah,
Oh no, verse 14. So the men took some of their provisions, but did not ask counsel from the Lord.
yeah, I highlighted that,
And Joshua made peace with them and made a covenant with them to let them live. And the leaders of the congregation swore to them.
but did not ask
Did not
counsel from
counsel
the
from the
Lord.
Lord. It's Joshua's one of the, like, he's like Daniel. There's a couple people in the Bible you don't really see blatant sin. You don't
Joseph,
see like failure like you do in Abraham's life when he lies.
yeah, oh yeah,
Joshua,
everybody,
Joshua, it's really hard to find his sin, but this is one of the places that it says he didn't ask counsel from the Lord. It's like if
yeah,
he would have gone to God, God would have said, no, these people are like your neighbors.
yeah. They're one of the people I want you to conquer. They're trying to deceive you, right? But you're right. It's only a few characters, right? Daniel's like that. Joseph is like that. They're all types of Christ. They all point to Christ, right?
Yeah,
Somebody's Joe because he's innocent and he suffers is like that, but he isn't without flaws. But yeah,
true.
this is definitely a flaw. We're like, nope, you blew it. You made a mistake. But then he keeps his covenant with them, though, right? And he just
Yes,
asks them later in verse 22, why'd you deceive us? They're like, well, because you're killing everybody and we thought we were going to die, right? Okay, then they become, I love this, woodcutters and drawers of water.
right.
Chop
Which
that
are
wood, carry water.
right. Which is important, right? Because they're kind of building. They have to build houses and build lots of buildings,
Yeah.
and water is definitely very important. And then
Yep.
in the book of Joshua, we also see where they stop eating manna. Um,
Oh, yeah.
that's earlier. I forget what chapter it is, but it says that they ate like their first meal in the promised land, I think. And as soon as they ate that meal that came from, um, yeah, help me find it.
Yeah, I'm trying to look for it now. Where is that?
Might be chapter 2.
It's got to be early on because I'm thinking what the significance of that is like, okay, now I'm not going to give this manna from heaven every morning to feed you. You got to go, you know, fend for yourselves, or you got to go get some food.
Yeah, so let's find this. Where is
So
it?
Rahab is in chapter 2.
It's maybe it's chapter 4 or 5.
Yeah, I don't know. This is crossing of the Jordan and the stones.
Yeah,
Chapter
it seems like it would be after that.
the new chapter 5. They're circumcised. The first Passover. Maybe it's in
First
chapter 5.
Passover.
10.
Yep, this
Yeah,
is
yeah,
it.
here it is. Yeah.
This
And the
is it.
day
Yeah.
after the Passover, this is chapter 5, verse 11. The day after the Passover.
On that very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain, and the manna ceased the day after they ate of the produce of the land, and there was no longer manna for the people of Israel, but they ate the fruit of the land of Canaan that year.
Yeah, that's a big event.
Yeah, that's kind of that's kind of interesting.
You know,
So I think another big theme in the book is, just God fulfills his promises.
yeah,
The word promise, it appears at least 14 times in the book of Joshua, because God promised the land of Canaan to the Israelites. And this is all about God making good on his promises.
yeah, definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
the whole notion of actually I was thinking about this during our Bible study yesterday when looking at the maps and as we are going to the book of Deuteronomy, just the whole the way God's provision worked out for the nation of Israel. You're going to be in captivity for 400 years, but by the end of 400 years of captivity in Egypt, they had grown to like 1 million people, right? And
Yeah.
then with Moses, let my people go. 1 million people start walking, and if you look at the map, you're leaving the place of Egypt where there's food production, there's agriculture, there's a whole system for providing food for 1 million people, and you start walking in the desert. You think just from a historical, archaeological perspective, the incredulity of that. I mean, like 1 million people wandering from a fertile plain to go in the desert, they're not going to last like a week. It's going to
It's
be like a week and a half. Like you're
it's
just
no
going to walk.
wonder.
There's no
Yeah.
food production. You can't possibly sustain life in the
No
desert.
wonder they grumbled so much.
Well, they did, but God provided the water from the rock and the manna from heaven, all that kind of stuff. But you think if you were a secular archaeologist looking at that, you'd say the whole thing is farcical because there's no way people could wander away from um, and and replicate that kind of food production in the desert, let alone the water. It just can't happen. And yet, I was looking at the thing for Joshua. They said, yeah, in this time, look, they're trying to date the book of Joshua. There were all kinds of small camps and settlements around there. They find it archaeological digs from a people that ostensibly did not eat pork. Because in the archaeology, that was not part of their diet, right? So they were, the historical event happened, the Exodus out of Egypt to this point but God has fed them with manna all this time and sustained them with water in the desert wilderness all this time. It's so miraculous on its face that you'd say, if you're like the archaeologists say, I can't believe it, but yet God did it.
Mm, yeah, it
So
is. Yeah, that it is amazing. Well, the whole story of Jericho and how they conquered Jericho, it falling in on the walls falling down
yeah.
after they marched around it, except for around Rahab's house, because she had the scarlet um, cord on the window, um, which some people say that scarlet cord represents Christ, is
Oh,
sort of a type of Christ, because she by faith put it out there to identify, so they could know where she lived, but then her house was not destroyed.
yeah.
And so I don't have strong feelings about that necessarily. But I think another theme is about faith, that true faith requires action. I mean, just think about the fall of Jericho. Um, I mean, God told them to march around the city, right? And they did it. They actually did it.
That's
I
right.
mean, they could have been like, no, we're not going
Yeah,
to
we're
do
not doing
that. That's silly.
that. Right. That's crazy.
Um,
Yeah, they took action.
they took action. Even when they crossed the Jordan River at flood stage, it says in chapter 3, um, they took action, you know. Um, and there's all kinds of in chapter 11. There's a battle where they were way outnumbered,
Mm-hmm.
but they still went to battle. So At the same time, another theme is disobedience leads to disaster, which
Is
you
that
mentioned earlier in
yeah.
chapter 7 with Achan's sin. Um, that one guy's disobedience, caused them to lose battles. And yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that story
Well,
of Achan?
it's just interesting, God's, because part of this is, because a big thing here that I don't know if you're going to address it when you teach on this in a couple of weeks, Greg, but like all these bloody battles, right? And can God using God conquering people and wiping them out? It's hard to read as a modern believer, right? And what God is doing. And one of the things I was reading about, because it's difficult, is
It is difficult.
yeah, and God's like, he does not he does tell him to say, I want you to go conquer these nations in the promised land. I don't want you to go to war with people outside the promised land. This is for very clear purpose for my promise to you. But it's also like saying it's not they were involved in incredible evil. So God is like, you are my instrument of judgment against their incredible evil, but you are also capable of incredible evil. Like you see with Achan, like, and I'm not going to be tolerant of it with you either. Um, and so if you're not following me that way, there's going to be consequence for that as well. So that's um I think part of that understanding of that is God's moral standard that all of us, every nation, every individual in every nation have fallen short of, and essentially everyone deserves. It's not like Canaan was somehow the people there were somehow singled out, or they were just they were singled out, but it's not like somehow that their sin was worse than any of us. So we all deserve that kind of. If God was truly just, the sword would fall on all of us for all of our
He'd
sins.
wipe us all out.
That's right.
Yeah.
He wiped us all. He'd bring back the
None,
flood if
none
he
of
was
us.
really just. Right.
But it is important though to recognize that the Canaanites were extremely evil. I mean, they were performing child sacrifice.
Right.
I mean, all kinds of things that uh, we would not tolerate. Any nation would not uh, tolerate. I mean, the closest thing is like when we hear about ISIS and some of the things that
Yeah.
they that they do, and I'm sure, um, yeah, it is a hard it is hard to swallow when you read some of these verses that talk about um, don't leave anyone alive. But then they were told not to take any of the spoils. But then this one guy, he gets greedy, and he
Mm-hmm.
just couldn't resist, and then he takes it home and buries it um, with his family, obviously participating in it too, um, knowing that he took it and probably helped him dig the hole to hide it. And
What do you think
then they
about the
get
way Joshua talks to him in that? In the end, he says, "Just be honest with me. Tell me everything. Don't hold back." Did you catch that at the end? Joshua's almost like, and then of course
yeah, this is chapter 7. What verse are you talking about?
let me find it because they kind of like they cast lots to say which group, which family, which they keep narrowing it down until they get to him,
Yeah.
right? And say this is chapter 7, verse 19. Then Joshua said to Achan, my son, give glory to the Lord of God of Israel and give praise to him, and tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me. Almost like real tender.
Yeah.
And when he does say it, they say, this is chapter 25. Joshua said, why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord brings trouble on you today. And all Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and stoned them with stones. It's kind of a little, I mean, it just seemed a little odd the tone Joshua takes. I don't know if there's a spiritual lesson for you, Greg, or if you want to bring it up in Bible study when you're teaching. It just seemed odd to me that he says, "No, no, you tell me anything. It's okay.
Yeah,
Just tell me, it'll be fine."
just tell me. Yeah,
Oh
you'll be fine.
yeah, yeah. Oh, I can't
That.
believe. Oh my gosh, what did you
Yeah.
do? Everybody, stone. You
Yeah.
know, but yeah, I think the spiritual lesson is like God's righteous law is absolutely 100% holy and righteous, and if he really kept to it, all of us would suffer this fate because we all deserve it.
Mm, yeah.
So
Um, that is, yeah. No, I, um,
just one of those random Bible observations, Greg. I don't know if it goes anywhere. Just I
I
just thought
will I will
quirky.
say that I will say the story of Achan reminds me of, is it Acts chapter 5, the Ananias
Yes,
and Sapphira? It kind of reminds me of that. And just
very
that
similar.
God is kind of setting an example that he really hates sin. And if we all got what we deserve, none of us would be.
Do you want to summarize that Ananias and Sapphira again for listeners that might not remember the story?
You can.
Well, everyone was supposed to give to the Lord, and they held back.
Yeah.
And then they said, like, why are you holding back? You didn't have to.
Yeah,
You didn't.
they made it look like they sold property and gave all the proceeds
Right,
back, but they only gave part of it back, and
right,
they kept some for themselves. And so they were deceptive to the early church and the church leaders, and yet the Holy Spirit made it clear to the church leaders that they lied and deceived, and they paid for it with their lives, you know.
right.
So it's one of those, again, it's a similar story of this. It's like it's an extreme example, and you think, man, if God did this, like imagine today if everybody that took something from somebody that didn't belong to them, would anybody be alive?
Well, I think this is the difficulty in reading it. The modern reader looks at this and says, "Oh, come on, this one little transgression. Why can't God be a reasonable God and just like it's not that big of a yes, we all make mistakes. And why can't God be more like Santa Claus, where no one gets a lump of coal? Yeah, yeah. I got the naughty list and the nice list, but at the end of the day, no one gets a lump of coal. They're all okay." And and I think a lot of Christians look at it that way. Like God's a reasonable God. So a few things here and there. Yeah, you took some silver bars, you hit them under your tent. Who hasn't done that? Come on, it's okay. Let's just forget about it, be friends. And the God of the Bible, I love it. Our pastor at our church talks about this. He said, read the Old Testament. They didn't treat God like your buddy that you put your arm around and kind of say, joke around with. They treated God like the way we treat a live electrical wire that's snapped from a high tension wire from a utility pole and is bouncing around the ground and sparking and flooding. That's the way they treated God, like with reverence and awe. Right. And to be fair, there's many different ways to understand God. He is our Father. He is our friend. He is our holy God. But the holy standard of God it's not this kind of reasonable God that bends the rules now and again to let you in. The holy standard of God is absolutely holy. It's only because Jesus met the standard for us on our behalf as our substitute that we have any prayer at all. You can't throw yourself in the mercy of reasonable God and say, "Oh God, come on, sinner like me should stand a chance with a reasonable God like you." It doesn't work that way. And it's not just an Old Testament thing. I just like that is through and through. God is an absolute 100% holy God. Jesus said, "I didn't come to abolish the law. I came to complete and fulfill the law for you on your behalf." So maybe there's a gospel angle, Greg, if you want to think about when you're talking about this in a couple of weeks. But stories like this kind of show, like, wow, God seems so unreasonable. He kills this guy for, like, this God is holy, and
Yeah. No,
you
I
say, "Well,
like
got to
what
be fair." Okay, well, if he was fair, we'd all deserve that.
I really like what you just shared, and it makes me think of even one of the things where we love talking about, which is um, how the gospel changes us from the inside out, and that we need to grow in our awareness of the depth of our sinfulness, but
Right,
also the height of God's holiness.
right,
That God is way more. We need to become. We need to become more and more aware of the holiness of God. But at the same time, as we do that, we also become more and more aware of the depth of our own sinfulness.
right,
And and all of us should at that point cry out, who can save us? What hope is there for me? The
right.
only hope is Jesus.
That's right.
The same Jesus that died for your sins, you know, is the same Jesus that helps you mature as a follower of Jesus, a follower of God.
Yeah, because
So
you grow in the gratitude of how I can't believe how he filled that gap for me, right? He's the one who
That's
closed
right.
filled that gap for me, right? So, and then one other thing, Greg, we talk about this a lot. Is you grow in your appreciation for His holiness. Like you read a passage like this, gosh, God is so holy. It should make you appreciate that that is the holiness that He gives to you and I in the great exchange. I mean, the gospel says, all my sin is put on Jesus, but all of His righteousness is put on me. So when the Father judges me, and the Father will judge me, He'll look at me through the lens of Jesus's blood and say, wow, not only did you not do anything wrong, you are so righteous, not because of me, but because of the gift of righteousness. So the more you appreciate God's actual righteousness, it should make you just filled with wonder, awe, and joy, because that is the righteousness He gives to you in the gospel. That's your standing. It's not just the wiping away of your bad stuff. It's the giving to you of all of Jesus's good stuff. It's just amazing. So passages like this, I think at first blush you could say, whoa, what is this? A little offensive. What does it mean? I think if you dig a little deeper, there's a lot of hope and joy you can see in this.
It's getting late. I think that that might be a great place to stop.
Let's wrap. There's a lot more here. I love it. And it sounds like from the way you started, you're going to get to the end where He says this, like the choice at the end is kind of final sermon, his final talk at the end about Father Lords, because there's a lot of great stories here, like Jericho and the Battle of Ai, different ones, and the sun standing still. We didn't even talk about that one, right? So,
Oh yeah.
So cool stories. But I think I think at the end He says, choose this day whom you'll serve. It's all leading up to that.
You got to serve somebody. As that great theologian,
Bob Dylan. You're gonna have to serve somebody.
You got to serve somebody.
That's right.
And it's funny because I'm reading through another book about it's actually on the topic of hell, and
oh boy,
and how it speaks about how kind of against the idea that hell is like God is like sending people to hell and He takes great pleasure. He's like, ha ha ha, you get to go to hell. Da, da, da. No, that hell is like a freely chosen place that people choose to go to. That's right. They just don't want to be with God. And I'm trying to think how this ties in with what I was just sharing.
No, I'll say because when He says then choose this day whom you serve, I was actually kind of making that point earlier. The notion that God says, you don't have to be with me if you don't want to. I'm not going to force you to be with me, right? I want you with me. I adore you. I love you for all eternity. Like when Jesus says later, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how many times I wanted to gather you as a hen gathers her chicks, but you would not. If you don't want to be with me in all eternity, you don't have to be. So people in hell,
it's a choice.
It's choice. And this is the C.S. Lewis's statement that all the doors of hell are locked from the inside.
Mm.
People say, I don't want to be with her. You think you're better than me? Look, I'm not a bad person, and no one tells me what to do. The two great sins, right? And to come to the Lord at some point, to taste and see the Lord is good, you got to say, maybe I'm not a great person. I need salvation, and maybe I'm willing to surrender to someone who's greater than me, so someone can tell me what to do. And those are the very two things that human beings don't want to do. Those are the two great sins, right? God says, okay. How could I possibly be more fair than this? If you don't want to admit those things and you don't want to be with me, you don't have to.
Yep. So I love this quote from Tim Keller. He says, hell is a freely chosen identity based on something else besides God going on forever.
That's right. So
he's a freely chosen identity based on something else besides God going on forever.
So for our listeners, some of the thoughts I just had on hell are from Keller's incredible sermon that he has on hell in a series. I think it's freely available on their website, but it's about how can you believe? But a lot of his thoughts and are in turn taken from C.S. Lewis on what hell is and how hell works.
Mm. Yep. So the challenge of Joshua: choose this day who you will serve.
Take the offer.
Are you gonna serve God, or are you gonna serve somebody else? It's funny that Joshua kind of ends the books that way, because think about that encounter he had That's basically.
Oh, right. That's the kind of he had. That's the choice.
Yeah.
That's great. I never put that together. That's great, Greg.
Yeah.
You're right.
I wonder if in his mind when he said that, choose this day who you're going to serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And that's basically what he said. I'm going to serve the Lord of the commander of the Lord's army.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Gospel Addict Podcast. Feel free to contact us via email at gospeladdictpodcast@gmail.com.
Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, on your worst days, you're never beyond the reach of God's grace, and on your best days, you're never beyond the need of God's grace.
See you next time.